All right, let's take a look at number 4 from the section 6.3 worksheet. We want to add and subtract these rational expressions as indicated. And we're going to assume no denominator is 0. I want to recommend that if you haven't tried this problem, you try it before you watch me work it out on the video. All right, so I'm going to factor the first denominator, and before I do that, I'm going to look at all of the denominators, and I'm going to choose to factor. I recommend choosing to factor whichever one seems easiest first. It turns out the second denominator is prime and doesn't need to be factored. But it does give me a clue that m plus 8 may be a factor in the other two denominators. As it turns out, the factor of the first denominator is m plus 8 times m plus 8. So this is actually the square of m plus 8. But I can write it out in expanded form instead of writing it as the square of m plus 8. But that's actually what it is. So there's a great possibility that the last denominator also contains an m plus 8. No promise or guarantee on that, but it's possible that there's an m plus 8 in this denominator. If there is, we know m times whatever my first term is in this first factor would have to give me 2m squared. So m times 2m gives me 2m squared. I also know that positive 8 would have to multiply with this second term in this first factor to give negative 40. So in order for that to happen, this would have to be 2m minus 5. So let's just see if that's true. So I'm just using the clue that maybe m plus 8 is a factor in each of the denominators. There's no guarantee of that though. Now we know 2m times m will give me 2m squared. 2m times 8, outside times outside, gives me 16m. Then I'm going to subtract 5m from that, since I have a negative 5 times m for inside times inside. So 16m minus 5m is 11m. And then we know that negative 5 times positive 8 is negative 40. So I do have this factored correctly. And if you wanted to write that out to check it, you could do that. All right, so I want to find my least common denominator. It's got to contain whatever is in the first denominator. So it's got to contain m plus 8 times m plus 8. So in other words, the highest power that ever appears on m plus 8 is 2. We see two factors of m plus 8, so this is actually the square of m plus 8. And so I have to have m plus 8 to its highest appearing power in the least common denominator. Now when I get to the second denominator, I have 1 m plus 8, and that's already contained in what I have written. Now I go to the third denominator. I see m plus 8 again. That's fine because I already have 2m plus 8s in my LCD, but I do not have a 2m minus 5. So that has to be included. All right, and so now I need to rewrite each denominator or each expression with my common denominator, which is m plus 8 times m plus 8 times 2m minus 5. Now notice in the first denominator, I have the 2m plus 8s, but I don't have the 2m minus 5. So this m minus 7 has got to get multiplied by 2m minus 5 over 2m minus 5. And so notice this first expression becomes m minus 7 times 2m minus 5 over the LCD. And this is equivalent to the first expression. All right, now I'm going to add this 1, which was over m plus 8. So that's missing the other m plus 8 and the 2m minus 5. So that needs to get multiplied by 2 factors in order for me to rewrite that as an equivalent expression with this LCD. So if I just had this middle part of the numerator over the LCD, that would be equivalent to the middle term in the original problem. And then when I go to the third term in the problem, notice how I have to parenthesize this now to write it correctly. I have 2m minus 5. I have one of the m plus 8s, but I don't have the other m plus 8. So to rewrite the the third expression in an equivalent form with the least common denominator, I have to multiply the top and bottom by m plus 8. So this third part of the numerator over the LCD is equivalent to the third term in the problem. And now I'm going to multiply. M times m is 2m squared. M times minus 5 is minus 5m. Minus 7 times 2m is minus 14m. Minus 7 times minus 5 is plus 35. 1 times m plus 8 times 2m minus 5 is the same as m plus 8 times 2m minus 5. So m times 2m is 2m squared. M times negative 5, outside times outside, is negative 5m. 8 times 2m is positive 16m. 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. And from all of that, I'm going to be subtracting 2m times m, and notice how I bring a parenthesis in. So that's 2m squared. 2m times 8, that's plus 16m. 1 plus 1 times m, that's plus m. And I'm going to go ahead and write this as plus 17m. 16m plus 1m is 17m. And 1 times 8 is a positive 8. And I just did that because I'm running out of room. Now what I have to be careful of here is that I subtract all three of those terms from the last numerator. And this goes over my LCD. All right, and so I need to combine like terms in that numerator. Okay, so I've got 2m squared plus 2m squared minus 2m squared. So this 2m squared will cancel out with this subtraction of that 2m squared. So I'll be left with 2m squared. I have a minus 5m and a minus 14m. That gives me a minus 19m. Another minus 5m, a plus 16m, Why don't I just write these all out real quick here? So I've got a minus 5 times m, a minus 14 times m, another minus 5m, a plus 16m, and a subtraction of 17m. So that's all multiplied by m. And then I have 35 minus 40, which is negative 5, minus 8. So negative 5 minus 8 is negative 13. And then this is all going to be over my LCD. All right. So I wind up with 2m squared. And let's combine these. Minus 5 minus 14 is minus 19. Minus another 5 is minus 24. Plus 16 is minus 8. Minus 17 is minus 25. So I have a minus 25m and then a minus 13. And my denominator is m plus 8 times m plus 8 times 2m minus 5. So everything is equal to my original problem. All right, so we are going to see if we can factor this, and actually we can factor it. So this factors into two factors. One of them begins with 2m, the other one's going to begin with m, and then the second factor is going to have a 13 and a 1. And I'll need an m minus 13 and a 2m plus 1. And I just did that by trial and error. If you don't see what the factors are and you need to try to calculate them, go to a piece of scratch paper and do that. 2m times m will give me my 2m squared. 2m times negative 13 is negative 26m, plus 1m gives me that negative 25m, and 1 times negative 13 is negative 13. So I have m plus 8 times m plus 8 times 2m minus 5. And notice I don't factor that any numerator until I get to the very end. And notice that that numerator doesn't have any factors in it that are common with any of the factors in the denominator. So this then is my final answer.